Hey guys, Chester Westerford here. Welcome to my review channel. And now, without further ado, here's my top 5 picks from the Patrick Troughton era of Doctor Who. Now, like with my William Hartnell picks, these aren't in any particular order, as I wasn't sure which one was actually the best. So, here we go. Number 1, The Evil of the Daleks. I think Troughton's Dalek stories are some of the best the show has had. It was a bit of a tough choice between this one and Power, but I think this one ranks slightly higher for me. Something about the imagery of the Daleks roaming around a Victorian English manor just really fits together in a way that it doesn't seem like it should. And although it's the end of Season 4, it does lead into one of my favorite seasons of Classic Who, Season 5, by introducing Victoria, thereby completing one of my favorite TARDIS teams. I know it's not a perfect season. I think it might be a lot of nostalgia that I like it, as I used to watch and listen to the Missing stories a lot when I was a kid. But, sorry, rabbit trail. Back to Evil of the Daleks. This story is unique. The cast is on top form, and we get the Doctor playing children's games with some partly human Daleks. The story isn't perfect, of course. The character of the Professor can get close to a little over the top, and the casting of a black actor as a mute servant is unfortunate, to say the least. But if you can look past all that, I think this is one of the best Dalek stories the show has ever had. It was actually meant to be the last story to ever feature the Daleks, so there's a really huge, finale at the end. But of course it wasn't. We all know how that turned out. The Tomb of the Cybermen. So, Doctor Who is actually only one of the main fandoms that I like. One of the other fandoms that I'm most a part of is monster films like the old Universal Monster series. And I also enjoy some of the Hammer productions as well. Of course, part of that genre is mummy movies, which this is in part a tribute to. It's a really fun mashup of classic archaeological mummy horror with science fiction-y Cybermen. It's also the first story as companion for newcomer Deborah Watling as Victoria, who is introduced in the previous entry on this list, Evil of the Daleks. There is a very nicely written and acted moment between her and Troughton where they discuss grief and remembering loved ones who have been lost. It's one of Troughton's most memorable moments as the Doctor. This whole story is a great one for Troughton, in fact. This being the start of the second season, I think he and the writers really seem to have settled on who his Doctor was by this point. Sylvester McCoy is often thought of as the most manipulative Doctor, and while perhaps not quite as severe, Troughton could have his moments as well. There are quite a few moments where he's one step ahead of everyone else, and while I wouldn't want to see that every single time, it does help to add a little more interest here and there. And, of course, it would be remiss of me to mention this story while not mentioning that iconic scene of the Cybermen breaking out of their tombs. It terrified kids at the time, and they've been trying to recreate it ever since. Although, maybe not quite as successfully. But still, they would only imitate it if it was the best. The Enemy of the World. Back before this episode was revealed to have been found in 2013, it was apparently regarded as one of the worst stories ever. I say apparently because I wasn't aware of this at the time and I didn't understand it. I had heard the soundtrack with linking narration years before and I loved it. When I found out that people didn't like it, I genuinely did not understand it at all. And when fans finally saw the story in its entirety, they apparently couldn't either. I mean, they could, that's just rhetoric, you know. But the point is, fan opinion has changed, and now others seem to regard it as highly as I do. In some shows, when they use tropes like one actor playing two parts, like a doppelganger story, it can feel a little tired, old, and maybe a little annoying if not done right. But it doesn't here because Patrick Troughton gives such an excellent performance as both the Doctor and the evil villain Salamander, and the Doctor pretending to be the evil villain Salamander. This episode has intrigue, James Bond-inspired spy action, and a few twists and turns that I at least wasn't expecting the first time around. If you haven't checked this one out yet, I definitely recommend you do. The Invasion. Another story to feature the Cybermen, Troughton seeming to be the Doctor who fought them the most. This is not only one of my favorite Troughton stories to feature the Cybermen, but I think one of the best stories overall to feature the Cybermen in the whole series. It also serves as the introduction of UNIT, with Sir Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart returning after his first appearance in the Web of Fear to be the head of this new organization. Corporal, soon to be Sergeant, Benton also makes his first appearance. The thing that really sells the story, though, for me, is the villainous Tobias Vaughn, played by Kevin Stoney. Although it's a Cybermen story, he is arguably the real main villain of the serial. He's one of those villains who hides his evil underneath a mask of charm and pleasantry, leaving the dirty work to equally great henchman Packer. The rest of the supporting cast is great as well, And there are some very iconic shots of the Cybermen invading London, one of which on the cathedral was so iconic it was stolen for new series episode Dark Water. Unfortunately, this serial does have a couple episodes missing, but fortunately it was the first of these serials to have its missing episodes animated, and I think the animation is pretty good on this one. And I'd say it's well worth a watch. I kind of want to watch it myself. But first, the War Games. This is not only Troughton's regeneration story, but also the finale for the current production team and the entire black and white era. How much of that they really thought about in the time is in question, but it definitely works for all those things. It's the only point in the classic series I could think of that is such an end. You really could compare it to the end of time or the essentially three-part Capaldi finale, in that the show was basically a reset in the next series. Even without all that, though, I think it's still a very enjoyable story. The mystery surrounding the different time zones is inventive, and seeing them collide at times is fun to watch. Although some might argue it could have been knocked down a bit from its 10-episode length, but I'm not sure they would have thought about that at the time since it was week to week. Usually when people get bogged down in padding, it's because they're watching it all at once like it wasn't meant to be watched, but that's kind of irrelevant. The main cast all get their chance to shine here as well, which is great because it was all their last show. And of course, this all builds up to the bit of the episode people remember the most, the end. I'm not going to say what happens in case you haven't seen it and have somehow managed to stay spoiler-free on an episode that is over 50 years old now. Seriously. Good for you if you have. But I will say that it is one of the most important reveals in the overall mythology of the show. So, what did you think of my list? Did you agree? Did you disagree? Should I have put some other ones on the list? Am I a total jerk because I got it all wrong? Let me know in the comments below. And I'll see you next time. I'm gonna go watch The Invasion.